What's up, YouTube? Poor Man Podcast back with another video. Today's video is going to be The Pill That Transformed Women by Jordan Peterson. Before I get into the video, though, gotta do the YouTube stuff. The goal is 75,000 subscribers by August. It's a crazy goal. It's a big goal, but it's my goal. I don't know way I'm gonna get to my goal is if you give me the HBO special. Do you know what the HBO special is? That's the Help a Brother Out special, all right? So go on and help a brother out. Hit the like and the subscribe button for more content. I'm gonna give you a second to do that. All right, now let's get to the video. The Pill That Transformed Women by Jordan Peterson. People, please listen to this. I know this ain't drama related. I know this ain't people yelling at each other, but I mean, the points that he makes in this video are extremely important. Just give it a listen. All right, y'all. Let's get to it.
It's almost impossible to overstate how revolutionary the birth control pill actually is. You know, people like to think that the political rights that women have attained have been a consequence of a political struggle, but I don't buy that for a second. I don't think that's true even in the least. I think that what happened was that we underwent a biological revolution in the 1950s, late 1950s, with the emergence of the birth control pill, and that for the first time in human history gave women pretty reliable control over their reproductive function, and that really transformed them into entirely different biological beings in many, many ways. Like, here's an example, a subtle...
And before he goes too far, I want to explain this a little bit. See, the thing about the birth control pill and the controversy that was surrounded by it was the fact that it was invented by Margaret Sanger. And so Margaret Sanger was a lady, she founded the American Birth Control League, right? And in that, they wanted to basically find a way to free women of their reproductive restraints, I guess, right? And she was also a front runner for Planned Parenthood. But the thing about it, and if you ask a lot of people on the left, if you ask a lot of people who are progressives, and I'm not saying I'm left or right, I'm just saying if you ask a lot of people who believe in a lot of the oppression Olympics, right, they'll say that she was a saint, right? But little do they know that Margaret Sanger she loved the eugenics. And for people who don't know what eugenics are, that's basically when you try to get rid of an entire group of people that you deem less desirable by sterilizing them and making it so that they can't have children. So basically trying to make a superior race through reproduction, right? And she had an idea. She proposed an idea in front of a group of Ku Klux Klan members called the Negro Project, right? And I want to read y'all something from that proposal during her conversation with a KKK group. This was her. This was something that she said, and I want to say it word for word, so I have it written down. She said, and I quote, "The gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the bloomings of the finest of flowers of American civilization." I wonder who she was talking about. When you fast forward to now, you got black women represent 6% of the American population, 6.5% of the American population, yet they represent 33% of abortions, right? So everybody's gonna have their opinion on the idea, but also originally, the birth control pill, the only reason it got passed politically was because it was invented for women who were in marriages that had already had too many children, and they wanted to slow down on having children. So they didn't want to have any more children, basically, because they couldn't afford them or for whatever reason. So politically, the only reason it even got passed was because it was said to be used for women who had already had children through marriage. So these are just very interesting tidbits going into what Jordan's going to say, but let's continue the video. My bad, y'all.
Subtle example. So, you know, if you track women through their ovulation cycle and you show them a picture of a man, the same man, and you do nothing but vary his jaw width, when they're ovulating, the guy with the wider jaw is more attractive, and when they're not ovulating, the farthest away from that, the guy with the thinner jaw is more attractive, and that's associated with testosterone levels. And so women who are fertile like more masculine men, and basically if you're on the pill, then you're never in that ovulation phase. And so one thing that may have happened, and I don't know this for sure, but it's interesting to consider, is that since women have been taking the birth control pill, their preference for less masculine men has become more pronounced. And that could easily be one of the things that's fueling at least some of the tension that's existed and exists now politically between men and women. Exactly. But the point is that you just cannot ignore the massive consequences of a biological revolution like that, and to make any other factor causal when you're trying to understand the political movements, especially in the last, say, 40 years, you're putting the cart before the horse. Now, it's reasonable to point out that the pill wouldn't have been accepted as a technology if certain political changes with regards to the emancipation of women hadn't already been in place, right? No one would have even been allowed to do something like investigate contraception. So you can't separate the biological from the political entirely, but it's still very useful to organizing your thinking to realize just how profound a revolution that was. But now back in the Victorian times, see, there's another thing about sexuality. Modern people like to think that there's nothing dangerous about sex, and that is like the stupidest thing you could possibly ever hypothesize, because everything about it is dangerous. It's dangerous emotionally, it's dangerous socially, it's dangerous because of the possibility of unwanted pregnancy, and it's dangerous because of the possibility of sickness, and that's a major one. I mean, so when AIDS emerged in the 1980s, that could have easily killed all of us. Now, the fact that it didn't was wonderful, but it did kill hundreds of millions of people. So it was no joke. It was a big deal. And
right. And before the sexual revolution, which pretty much happened because of birth control. So pretty much now that women aren't going to get pregnant, it's like, oh, well, all clothes off, right? Let's just go ahead and have as much free love, free sex as we can, because there's no consequences to what we're doing now. Turns out new consequences manifested, right? So before the sexual revolution, the only two diseases, STDs, that were seen to exist were gonorrhea and syphilis, right? And they were huge, they were major problems. But with the sexual revolution came the birth of AIDS and the birth of herpes. And if you look at humans today, it's estimated that between 50 to 85%, which is a huge range, by the way, but 50 to 85% of American adults today have herpes as a result of the sexual revolution. So the idea that there are no consequences to going out and just being promiscuous is absolutely ridiculous, regardless if that may be you getting pregnant, regardless if that may be you getting an STD, or regardless of that you being or having to live with the decisions that you make in terms of, yes, you gave yourself away, so it tends to devalue you in your personal opinion of yourself, right? And I have a lot of these conversations with women who are promiscuous, and behind closed doors, the conversations that I have are a dark reality. And a lot of the times they see themselves as less valuable because they've given themselves away to too many men. And that's just one of those things that happen. So it's just really interesting to see that was a part of humans. And now when you see cold sores, though, cold sores are a manifestation of oral herpes. 50 to 85% of the U.S. adult population today has oral herpes, and that's due to the sexual revolution. So you can thank them for that. Let's continue the video, though.
AIDS mutated to take advantage of promiscuity, and so the relationship between sexual behavior and the transmission of disease is actually mediated at the biological level. But anyways, back in the 1890s, they had the same problem, right? They had the problem with syphilis. And syphilis is one nasty disease. It can mimic almost any other disease, and it's devastating to your nervous system, and you can pass it on to your children. And so part of the reason that sexuality was heavily repressed in the Victorian period was not only because of the possibility of unwanted pregnancy, the relative poverty of people. You know, back in 1895 in Europe, the average person lived on less than $1 a day in modern terms. You know, it's almost impossible to understand how poor people were. And so sex in a poverty-stricken place is also a lot more dangerous than it is in a rich place, because especially if given the lack of employment opportunities for women back in the Victorian period, if you happened to get pregnant out of wedlock, you were in serious trouble.
Yeah. And that just goes to show some of those, just me giving my final thoughts. But when people say that, historically speaking, women have been sexually repressed, that's not necessarily the case. Well, I will say that kind of is the case, but it wasn't for the reason of just the patriarchy wanting to exist and suppress women, because if they find out their true power and sexually liberate, they can go on and take over the world. And when you see the women that are sexually liberated today, you don't see happy women for the most part. You look at the rate of suicide for women has increased by 70%. All right, so somebody isn't very happy, okay, with their newfound sexual liberation is what I'm saying. And what Jordan's kind of saying here is this: when you're poor, the consequences for sex are just different, right? There are more consequences. Now we're in a day and age where we can just order pizza and have it here in 20 minutes, hot and ready. You forget how hard it has been, historically speaking, for humanity, right? So I think we lost a lot of that, remembering how hard it's been for us because we have it so good now. And in a lot of our lifetimes, it's just been good, right? We haven't seen world war, right? We haven't seen a major famine. We haven't seen any, like, so many of these things that a lot of other time periods seen because they didn't have the technological advances that we have today. So I think sex was just another one of those things where it was seen as taboo because of the consequences that came along with it, right? And I think it's still that way today. We're trying to do this thing where we say it doesn't matter, but it obviously matters if it's to the point where every man has to. I'm not gonna go too far. I'm not gonna go down that road. I just end it here. I appreciate y'all for listening. Till next time.